How's it going, everyone? Venomous Stare here with another 2v2 cast. This time we're going to be talking about the Power of the Colossus with macro styles. Now, this video isn't going to be so much like a build or a tutorial as it's going to be like a cool 2v2 game with a lot of commentary focused around the Colossus, because the Colossus has really fallen out of favor, and I feel like it's still a good unit that is worth making in some instances. So let's talk about this map, the snowy map. I think it's called like Snowy Mesa or something. This is one of the macro maps in 2v2. Basically in 2v2 you have two kind of maps, macro maps and rush maps. And basically it's usually really easy to take expansions, or it's really difficult, almost impossible. So this is a map where it's easy to take expansions because there's these double rock towers and they're both collapsible. So once you collapse one, the other falls, so you can wall yourself in very quickly with certain builds. And that's what you're going to see from me here today. I'm going to go Nexus first, and then I'm going to try to break down the rock tower, because you're never going to really be able to wall this in time to stop a rush. But you can kill the rock tower. My ally this game looks like he's just going to play pretty standard. The red Zerg Sky has gone hatchery first, and Doctor, knowing it's a macro map, has taken a fast Nexus. One gate expand, and then he's going to go double gas behind it. So one thing that Sky is doing that I like is he's keeping his Overlord above his hatchery. This enables him to see cannon rushes. This is a smart map, or this is a smart move, especially on in 2v2 and on this map, because a lot of people will cannon this base, because you can make a little cannon contain here, or cannon right here, and then they're cut off from the gold and the natural and escaping. And then you can progress the cannon rush up to the base of this ramp, and if they were stupid enough to make tech right here, it will be dead too. So good move by Sky, and now he sends his Overlord a little bit away. And Savagewood is drone scouting, or probe scouting, worker scouting, whatever. This is very important in 2v2 because there are some heinous cheeses people will just throw out randomly you have to be wary of. And it's really just one probe. It means even less in 2v2. In my opinion, you kind of have to look at 2v2 like the extra person, the ally, gives you a lot more, room to fluctuate within your build. You can do more greedy things, you can do more aggressive things, you can cut more corners. So remember that in 2v2. It's really not a big deal to scout. The information about what two people are doing is far more valuable than the one worker, because if you scout double proxy, like if this was Protoss Terran, and I scouted nothing in base and could assume it's all proxies, that can win you the game oftentimes, which is worth the small percentage of games where people cheese. I would say people do more ridiculous cheeses and more abusive builds in 2v2 than 1v1. Because like I said, the other person really enables you to get away with that. So the blue Terran, Cool Breeze, is expanding. He's also started tank production. He has another barracks on the way. This is an extremely safe build. Reactored Marine, you get your tanks. This really defends against all warp gate rushes from the ground. So even if these rocks were busted by a 4 gate or something similar, maybe a blink play, blink would be more difficult, but this tank will really shut down a lot of Protoss all-ins. This map is also very good for tanks. There's lots of high ground. You can set up here, you can set up here, or here. Like if you set up on this little peninsula, I guess, it overlooks this choke, which is a huge part of this map, because the only other way to attack is this choke, and you defend the gold base. It's a very, very strong spot. +1 finishes for Savagewood as well as his Robo. Now, Savagewood only has 3 gates, and he's somewhat greedily going to take a Twilight. And the red team loses an observer narrowly to the cannon. And Cool Breeze is going to use these heavy damage dealing tanks to clear the rocks. Meanwhile, the red team is doing the same. Sky appears to be posturing to take this base. Now, if you were to ask me, it's better to give the non-Zerg this gold because they you want the Zerg to be able to creep spread. A big part of 2v2, if you have one Zerg on your team, is picking and choosing which expansions the Zerg gets. Because if you look at Sky, he's really not going to be able to creep spread effectively. So if he goes a ground-based army like we're seeing, he's already committing to Roach Tech with this +1 offense, the Roach speed, and the Hydra Den. So he's not going to have any creep really unless he puts a tumor here and moves Overlords out. But I would have preferred to see him take this expansion and then this expansion, or perhaps even this one. Hydra's coming out for Sky, as well as his third. And a Warp Prism is coming out for Doctor, and he's finished the Adept upgrade that lets them attack factor. Resonating Glaives, maybe? And Doctor runs the Observer into the base of the blue team. Now he sees pretty much everything here after losing that first Observer. If we go to his vision, it's very good. So Doctor's done a great job of scouting this game. He really has an eye on the Terran. We see Cool Breeze. He's opted for somewhat of a late starport here. He's really opted to play safe with these reactored Marines and with the CC. He's really delaying a lot here. If we go to structures, he doesn't even have E-Bays. So he's playing very safe and he's expanding quickly. That's really what he's doing. He's not really committing anything to offense. Savagewood here sees the rocks being destroyed. Thankfully all those units were focused on to the rocks, but he's going to lose the Observer anyway because he's bad. Savagewood at least has pylons out on the map. This is one important thing about this map. Whenever you play this map and you're going to expand and break the rocks, you have to get a probe out on the map and make multiple pylons, because you never want to be restricted as Protoss and be unable to attack completely. As Zerg, this is a great move. Sky is blocking an expansion completely with his creep spread. This is very annoying and more Zerg should do this. And in 2v2, keep in mind if you're not facing any Zerg opponents, this is a great move because it will work against both of them. And if you're playing double Zerg, you should do this on literally every single base, except obviously the mains. Because as Zerg, obviously your ally spreading creep on a base won't block it. Creep is friendly. If your ally is Zerg, then it never really obstructs you like it does if you're playing Terran or Protoss. So Cool Breeze has a lot going on. He's gone 2 starport, and he's elected to build 1 Raven at a time along with his 2 medevacs. This is very intelligent versus Zerg, especially Zergs that like creep spread, and I kind of wonder why more Terran players don't do this, especially if this was double Zerg. Now, because of the nature of the expansions that the red team took, this won't really be as beneficial as it would in some games. Doctor is poking and prodding around with his 1 Adept Warp Prism. And Savagewood's Colossus range is about to finish, and Savagewood has a couple Colossus out already. So let's talk about the Colossi. The reason that Colossus are so good in 2v2, and particularly on this map, is because if you want to attack, you have to pretty much go through this choke or this choke, because both players are going to be posted up defending these expansions. So you're never going to get caught with your pants down really, and you let them get all the way down here. But look at all these chokes. Now what's strong about Colossus is they're very similar to tanks in the respect that they kind of inhibit your opponent from just attacking into you. If you have Colossi and your opponent is Zerg, they're going to have a very difficult time just running into your army, because when they do, they're going to be taking huge amounts of splash damage before they even can get in range to start doing damage. Similar to the siege tank, if you want to, like, look at Cool Breeze here. If he sieges these tanks up, the Zerg is going to be very hard pressed to attack, because every single time he commits or even pokes up, he's going to take damage. And in StarCraft, you always want to force your opponent to make constant decisions, because oftentimes Zergs will just say screw it, and just, if they see a lot of tanks and they've already kind of committed to an attack, they'll say, well, I'm already halfway committed. If I pull back, I'm going to lose half of my army anyway, so I'll just attack. And they'll take a really unfavorable engagement. Whereas I'm going to be comparing Colossus to the new unit, the Disruptor, this game, because people are kind of favoring the Disruptor over the Colossus. They kind of replaced the Colossus with the Disruptor. And this game is a really great example of why the Colossus is good. Not to say that the Disruptor wouldn't have been good, but I'm just going to talk about why I prefer Colossus styles. So a little bit of harassment coming out from Doctor. Nice move with the Warp Prism. And this Observer is really intelligent until he got spotted by the cannon and died. But he had an Observer over here for a long time, which was really smart, because that enabled him to see whenever the defensive units I made left. If you remember, I had a lot of Stalkers over here. I'm Savagewood, and his Observer saw that, and this enabled him to know that I still have my defensive units there, and he needs to go elsewhere with his Warp Prism. A big component of harassing is knowing where to bring your harassing unit, your Muta, your Warp Prism, your drops, because if you can always know where your opponent's defenses aren't, then you're going to be at a huge advantage and always do damage. But if you're always just kind of guessing, if you attack and then see defense and fly away, and then oftentimes you'll send a drop in to do damage, you just won't do any damage because your opponent will still have their defensive units there. So it's very important to keep an eye on that, because in situations like this, when Savagewood's facing a huge Zerg army, he's going to be tempted to move these Stalkers away from their defensive positions. So Savagewood has lots of Colossus here, 9, and I fucking misclicked. Okay, so where were we? I don't think I went too far back. So we see Mass Marine coming out here for Cool Breeze as well as Tank. Now, he's going lots of Ravens, which isn't really that good. I think it's very useful in some instances, but he's kind of skimping on medevacs here. Actually, he has 10 medevacs, that's a fair amount. But he should be getting Vikings too with this reactored starport. Okay, the blue army is completely maxed and they're about to fight. That makes a lot more sense actually, I didn't realize he was maxed. So Cool Breeze is going to run in, and they have the power of Tank and Colossus, so the blue team choosing to engage, lots of laser beams coming down from the Colossi. Meanwhile, the Terran army is trying to fight the Zerg, but with really no Marauders there, it's going to be difficult. Corruptors, lots of Corruptors coming in and dealing with the Colossi. Corruptors deal bonus damage to massive units, most people know that, but the Marines pick off a lot of the Corruptors, and Savagewood runs forward and can easily pick off the Lurkers very quickly, which are often troublesome to pushes. This Tank Colossi combo is going to be great in 2v2. And we can see the red team, Doctor, is starting to go Colossi himself, and he has more production. He's going 3 at a time. Actually, no, Savagewood's Robo's just finished. He has 4 now. So Doctor briefly had the supply advantage as far as ability to make Colossi. But the Zerg player has lots of Corruptors. Sky has committed heavily to killing this Colossus army. He's made 17 Corruptors. Cool Breeze extending forward a bit, as Savagewood is a little bit belated in his attempts to run forward. But the blue team has the time advantage as they have the expansion advantage. Colossi running forward here, it's like War of the Worlds, as the blue team has the Colossi advantage, but Sky has a ton of Corruptors, enough to one-shot Colossi, and that will enable the red team to destroy this army. So that's one weakness of Colossi, is Zerg can make Corruptor and kill them. Now, I'm going to really go out on a limb here and say that's not a weakness, because Corruptors are really awful units, as we see a terrible rally from Savagewood. Because if you can force Zerg to make Corruptors, and make a ton of them, in a low econ kind of game where they're always grinding them out, a lot of times they'll get stuck on Corruptors or make too many, and you can switch into Immortals, and Corruptors are terrible against Immortals. And whenever you frequently attack your opponent, and you always pressure them, you're always forcing them to make Roaches and Corruptors just to survive, you inhibit them from teching up to everything they want, like Greater Spire, like really good air upgrades. So these corruptors will be dead weight after you switch into immortals, and oftentimes whenever you go Colossi and Protoss versus Protoss, your opponent will attempt to counter your Colossi with Colossi of their own, especially in 2v2. So then you can go into Immortal, which also counter Colossi. So the blue team is going to be attacked here. Savagewood has a healthy mix of beefy Protoss units, Archon and Colossi. He also has good upgrades, especially compared to Doctor, who's gone for this armor-focused versus Terran style, whereas Savagewood kind of has the whole smorgasbord. Cool Breeze has a huge Marine army running forward. These Marines need to protect Savagewood's Colossi, as the blue team is moving a bit disjointed here. But just a handful of well-upgraded Marines are going to be able to dissuade these Corruptors. And as we can see, these Corruptors, there's so many, they're killing the Colossi easily, but they're taking damage from unstemmed Marines. These very low unstemmed Marines can die very quickly to Colossi. He needs to be careful. But the Colossi don't have any support units at all. The red team just does not have the expos they need. We can see Cool Breeze has this, Savagewood has all of these, and he's also harassing with his Mothership Core. Cool Breeze has made a ton of Marines all game. His macro's been pretty decent throughout the game. He's floating a bit now, but we can see Sky has made all these Corruptors, which are completely and utterly focused on countering Colossi, and they're absolutely terrible and useless against Immortals, which need a completely different counter. And Savagewood made 4 robos off of his huge macro. Notice this is a gold base, so this, if we go to income is very high, and really it's fallen off compared to what it was because the first 2 bases aren't even mining. We can see the blue team is just cleaning up what's left of the red. Savagewood is killing this top base and hopefully this DT shrine, and he's making pylons down here to harass the main, and GG from the red team. So the blue team won that game, displaying some nice Colossus into Immortal technique, I guess, and Cool Breeze did a good job macroing and making tanks, and that really showed that you can go Colossi and force your opponent into an unfavorable unit composition and then transition into Immortal, especially when your ally makes tanks. If you enjoyed that, subscribe.